Today we're going to be going over Act 1, Scene 3. But first, here are some of the key quotations that we looked at in Act 1, Scene 1 yesterday. So, going through very quickly, first of all, the idea that Faustus sees his studies so far as being something finite, as with the repetition of end and end. His use of these for personal gain, as in be a physician, heap up gold. And finally, his selective quotations of scripture. As we saw in the example, the reward of sin is death, that's hard. And of course he doesn't finish the quotation, which actually means something entirely different. When he's fantasizing about what will have the spirits and devils do, we've got the anaphora of I'll have them, I'll have them, I'll have them. And finally what he will have them do, i.e. fly to India for gold and fill the public schools with silk, i.e. personal, financial or economic gain, nothing to do with intellect or learning at all. Act 1, Scene 3, then, begins with a highly atmospheric moment where Faustus conjures up Mephistophiles. Now, I've just read Scene 1. Just to recap, Faustus does indeed devote himself to necromancy, and, supported by Valdez and Cornelius, he does resolve to conjure up spirits. But something appears to have happened or changed between these two scenes. Faustus says, "And try if devils will obey thy hest." In his Latin conjuration, he calls upon Lucifer, i.e. the devil, to send him Mephistopheles. Now, even if you don't know Latin, just invoking these names in red, Lucifer, Beelzebub, Mephistopheles, makes it pretty obvious what he's doing. But no one yet in the play up to this point has mentioned invoking devils, invoking hell. This all seems a lot more sinister than much more vague notions to conjure up spirits as earlier. I won't attempt to get to the bottom of this now, but surely, bearing in mind the morality play context of Faustus, it might be much more effective for Faustus just to do that, to conjure up generic spirits and then end up invoking devils. That's a classic idea of smaller sins leading to big ones, or spiralling out of control. Faustus is, of course, much bigger than any medieval or Tudor morality play, and maybe it points towards what Marlowe's really interested in. He wants to probe into matters of good, evil, the supernatural, hell. He wants transgression from the outset. This very important scene introduces a number of ideas. Faustus, first of all, is powerless against supernatural forces. Despite all the onstage drama at the start, it wasn't the conjuring that invoked Mephistopheles. He says he came hither of his own accord, and that whenever the devils hear someone rack the name of God and reject the scriptures, they fly in hope to get his glorious soul. Notice the rack metaphor, linking to medieval prohibitions against blasphemy and swearing, which were believed literally to torture Christ on the cross. How odd that it's Mephistopheles who uses this condemning imagery. And this brings us to the next idea, the irony throughout the scene that it is the demon who is telling the truth. He is not tempting Faustus. He is not tricking him with wordplay or anything that's ambiguous. Notice his language here. It's terse, it's direct, it's straightforward. And later on, his moralizing language surely only echoes Christian doctrine. He acknowledges his sins of aspiring pride and insolence, notice a clear parallel here to Faustus, refers to himself as unhappy, damned, tormented, being apart from the eternal joys of heaven and everlasting bliss. How ironic that it is one of the demons from hell who so unambiguously states Christian truths here. Notice, of course, his words, "Why, this is hell, nor am I out of it," a wonderful parallel to Milton's Satan in Paradise Lost, who says, "Which way I fly is hell, myself am hell." We'll be considering Mephistopheles' role in more detail later throughout the whole play, but bear in mind that this scene is an important one. Faustus, meanwhile, misses the point. You could excuse the excerpt here as him being naive, perhaps. He's mixing Christian conceptions of heaven and hell with those of the ancient Greeks, and the issue of how to incorporate the ancient pagan past to the Christian doctrine was a bit problematic. But let's look at the end. He refers to vain trifles of men's souls. This is almost oxymoronic. Matters of the immortal soul are hardly trifles, trivialities. I wonder why he says men's souls. Is he already counting himself as a spirit, as later on, or at least someone elevated beyond other mere mortals? He then dismisses Mephistopheles' moving and chilling responses with their emotive exclamations, with "Learn thou of Faustus' manly fortitude." It is difficult to sympathise with this. Having never tasted the joys of heaven as Mephistopheles has, he clearly would have no idea about how to approach this. There's a nice Roma Guild quotation on the bottom of page 22 of your edition. The unhappy devil speaks the bleak infinity of misery and experience to the uncomprehending doctor, who is exuberant, overconfident, and so ignorant that he can offer to instruct his mentor. Expresses it quite nicely, I think, in how Faustus naively assumes he has greater experience than Mephistopheles. In your own time, you may wish to look over the end of the scene. We see more of what Faustus really wants from this bargain with the devil, to be great emperor of the world and to have Mephistopheles give me whatsoever I shall ask, and so on. It is telling, though, how after Mephistopheles exits, Faustus's initial reactions to all he has seen and heard is, "Had I as many souls as there be stars, I'd give them all for Mephistopheles."